Everything begins in a world where the law of the strongest rules and the weak lose their property and status. They even end up losing their own lives. A cruel reality for anyone. Because of all this injustice, things took a dark turn amid the sand. The protagonist laments that he is dying simply for being a pathetic and weak guy. About 100 years ago, a chilling ray of light struck planet Earth out of nowhere. This mysterious brightness began to devour every living being that inhabited it. Our beloved blue planet, once home to all life, changed drastically. It soon transformed into a massive and desolate tomb of sand. All that remained for the few human survivors was to build an impenetrable fortress. Completely furious, Zion questions why they left those bugs behind instead of destroying everything right away. At that moment, someone smashes his head against the wall. The person mocks him, saying his hand simply slipped, then asks for his name just to apologize properly. Staring at the man, he replies that his name is Zion. Finding it amusing, the man laughs in his face for having only one name and calls him a fatherless bastard. The atmosphere grows heavy and the bully notices the rage stamped on the boy's face. Draping an arm over his shoulder, the brute tells him to relax, since everyone heading to the mines is in the same boat. Curious, the man wants to know why he was caught, guessing it was assault or robbery. With no patience for small talk, Zion lands a punch directly in the man's face. From the impact, the big guy flies backwards over the vehicle's seats. Advancing without hesitation, the boy warns that his guess was wrong and asks if he really wants to know the truth. Taken over by rage, he reveals that the crime was murder, though technically it wasn't exactly a person, since in Nelsay only the powerful are considered truly human. It all happened because of a rat that tried to steal his things and ended up dying alone in the garbage dump. The problem is that the boy didn't know that Pet Vermeil belonged to a very dangerous man. As soon as it hit him, and he heard the man's name, despair struck hard. After all, if the powerful are people, an awakened is considered a true god above all others. To sum up the disaster, a mere rat from the dump had just offended a deity in Kofo. By the time he grasped the gravity of the rumors and what he had done, he was already on the bus heading to the mines. Back in the present, the bully stands up wiping the blood and asks if the little show is over. At that moment, the brute goes all in and delivers a slap across Zion's face, sending him flying. That blow was so powerful it dealt critical damage to the boy. Furious, the big guy warns he crossed the line and should have just explained why he was there from the start. The protagonist is distraught, since he had fought so hard to escape the awakened, but in the end fell into yet another trap. Unexpectedly, an aura appears in the brute's hands, sending everyone into a panic as they realize he is also an awakened. However, something strange begins to happen and the bus is suddenly hurled upward. Understanding nothing, the big guy curses the driver, demanding he drive properly, but he notices the driver is in a panic, unable to utter a single word. The brute asks what on earth he's mumbling. The driver begins saying they're all done for, that it's over for all of them. Hearing that, the bully asks what the hell he's talking about, and the driver responds in a completely panicked tone that everyone on board was sent there only to become food. Confirming the nightmare, the gigantic mouth of a sand monster appears, swallowing everything around it. Chaos erupts as dozens of people fall directly to certain death while screaming in despair. Being pulled by gravity, the protagonist reflects that his life has always been a repetition of the same cycle, whether it was bumping into an awakened in the city or being devoured by a giant worm in the desert. It didn't matter. He struggles in the middle of the sand, trying to fight against a force impossible to overcome. The realization hits hard that in this cursed world, it's natural for the strongest to strip everything from the weakest. As he watched the worm's mouth closing, he concludes that his death is simply the result of his own weakness, and he mocks that fantasy of his, that if he had been a little stronger, none of this would be happening. With no strength left to react, his hand slowly sinks into the merciless grains. The whirlpool continues spinning violently, swallowing any trace of resistance, but suddenly his eyes fly open with an intense and unexpected light. In a desperate impulse, the young man bursts from the earth, spitting sand and gasping for air. Breathless and completely drained, he grabs his own chest trying to recover. A mysterious energy pulses through his entire skeleton, changing something profoundly within him. Pieces of debris fall heavily onto the dunes beside him. Confused but focused, he stares into the void, trying to process the miracle he just experienced. In the distance, the ruins of ancient human wonders lie buried as his heart beats hard. The entire desolate landscape of the dead city seems to echo the frantic beats in his ears. The glow in his eyes intensifies with each new pulse of life taking over his body. Even the giant metal carcasses around him seem to witness the change taking place. His heavy breathing continues as he sets his jaw to endure the jolt of energy. From space, the dead and silent planet gives no sign of the awakening occurring on its surface. The transformation reaches its peak, radiating a power he has never had before. In a cry of liberation, he explodes a violent aura of power around himself, repelling the dust. The impact of the energy pierces through the worm's carcass. In the midst of viscera and wreckage, he carves into his mind the absolute promise that he will survive. Even in that forsaken hell, where everything turned to dust, he refuses to be another victim. With his posture straight and bathed in the light of his own strength, the young man decides he will live no matter what. The frightened expression gives way to a cold face, totally focused on his new objective. He then reaffirms that he will keep his life, whatever the cost. Zion clearly feels the energy pulsing strongly in every cell of his body and notices, shocked, that he has finally gone through an awakening. Cutting his moment short, the gigantic sand monster rises threateningly, ready to attack. The colossal creature charges with everything it has towards Zion. However, something strange happens. A mysterious man warns that the boy is getting in the way of the test. This leaves the protagonist completely baffled. With the impact of the fight between the man and the giant worm, the protagonist is hurled away, crashing hard against the sandy ground. Understanding nothing, he wonders, what the devil is that monstrous speed the stranger has? He looks at the fight again and realizes the man had driven his sword into the worm. With the fight already over, the man thinks of returning to the surface. Then, he raises his foot high and completely crushes that giant worm. Watching the brutal spectacle, the protagonist concludes, frightened, that all of this is pure madness. Looking at it all, Zion is in awe of the real awakened. A blue-haired girl appears beside the protagonist and enthusiastically praises the skills of Captain Jane Yong. Looking at the girl, the protagonist is completely baffled. Feeling the side effect, Zion notices his own skin bizarrely cooling after the use of energy. Excited, the girl comments to her colleague Giselle that creature was no match for the boss. The conversation is overheard and the commander's sharp gaze turns slyly to look behind him. He spots the boy lying in the sand just behind the noisy pair. The energetic subordinate snaps to attention with a salute out of respect for the veteran. In the abrupt movement, she advances and violently grabs the wrist of the survivor lying there. Pulling mercilessly, the girl pins him against the ground, dominating the injured body effortlessly. Building suspense, she proposes they guess the classification and power of their new friend. However, upon pulling up the sleeve of his jacket in search of the magic mark, she loses all her enthusiasm. Giselle moves closer, calling the idea idiotic, since the target clearly has no powers. The captive screams in desperate pain from his twisted arm, while the girl points to the absence of an insignia. With his face pressed into the ground, he hears the soldier declare it's impossible for anyone to conceal the symbol. The guard shoves Zion roughly into the armored vehicle, warning about the imminent sunset. The girl asks what they will do with the prisoner, only to be scolded by the hostage about her recent aggressiveness. Yang fixes an intimidating stare to determine the fate of the useless stranger. Sweating cold, the protagonist awaits the verdict at a total disadvantage. The captain orders them to throw the poor wretch into the transport vehicle, since the mines were his destination from the start. The heavy military vehicle accelerates, crossing the vast desert under an orange sky. Inside, Giselle argues heatedly that she always acts alone when it gets dark. Ignoring the commotion, Zion finds the journey quite pleasant and wonders how far the slave camp is. Lying down, rocking in the metal cage, he takes the moment to reason calmly. The memory of his own arm crackling with energy moments before comes back clearly to his mind. Observing his bound hands, the boy is absolutely certain he awakened a gift by commanding the sand. Intrigued, he doesn't understand the invisibility of his mark to others and notices a different shade in his skin. Looking very closely, faint lines mark his wrist in the exact same color as the dust of the region. The general rule of this world makes sense now. The hue of the symbol reveals the user's affinity. Mages, like the cheerful girl, naturally emit a bright blue aura. Warriors focused on physical attributes like the captain radiate red brilliance. Staring at his connection to the earth, the boy considers that his gift fits into the extremely rare cases in the system. After all, direct manipulation of the sterile environment is something he has never heard of in his life. Even bearing the lowest level of all, the sensation inside him pulses with an infinite potential equal to the desert. Malice and ambition take over the protagonist's face at the discovered secret. Decided, he vows to hide his true strength and patiently endure humiliation until the right moment. In his twisted mind, the entire planet will kneel and serve as a stage for his ascension. The transport finally arrives at a colossal industrial structure embedded in the dark cliffs. Walking through the miserable camp, the newcomer observes the routine at the monostone control post. Giselle pulls the line, telling him to hurry up, but the captive retorts, demanding they cut the ropes first. The military escort advances through the metal walkways full of filthy workers. Walking beside the boss, the blue-haired subordinate reduces the young man's survival to a mere stroke of luck. Frontally disagreeing with her partner, the veteran states dryly that it was no accident. The commander's eyes narrow as he recalls the details of the battlefield. The image of an enormous hole in that colossal worm haunts the captain's mind. Entering the shadows of the cave, Zion regrets not having asked the big man's identity, trusting in a future encounter. The interior of the excavation area turns out to be a true underground slum packed with miserable people. Chaos dominates the improvised cafeteria, where slaves compete for the little available space to live. The guard cuts the ropes with a shot and tells him to shut up and wait for the supervisor's orders. Provoking the sentinel, the boy calmly asks if the plan is to shoot him before leaving. The red-haired warden backs off, stuttering upon hearing the prisoner joke that a cornered rat can't do anything. Furious at the audacity, the guard turns his back cursing while the hero's stomach growls loudly. Nudging the shoulder of an elderly cook at a cramped stall, he excuses himself through the greasy smoke. However, the boy's attention is immediately stolen by a detail hanging on the zinc wall. A propaganda poster with a lying slogan extols the sweat of labor as the true light of Neo-Se. Cynically, he asks the grill master if that piece of paper isn't a great daily inspiration. Handling utensils with work-hardened hands, the old man agrees with the absurdity of the message. Seeking to understand the place's scheme, the stranger asks what drives the metropolis if not the magic stones. Without any beating around the bush, the worker lifts the knife and points it directly at the young man's chest. With a face weathered by time, the veteran decrees coldly that their disposable lives are the true fuel of the system. Continuing the chat, the old man complains that the newcomer talks too much, suggesting that at his age he should already be preparing for the beyond. Ignoring the scolding, the boy asks how he ended up inside the monster and whether the rumors had already reached there. Irritated, the veteran warns that he'll soon become worm dung and that this place isn't a hideout. It only exists to profit. In a cynical tone, the old man dismisses the idle talk and decides to show something interesting, pointing to the side. In the dark corner of the camp, old shelves full of boxes and scrap are piled up. Confused, Zion asks if the guy has lost his mind for finding garbage interesting, but the cook explains he collected all of it little by little. The mood grows heavy when the old man reveals that those are the remains of the people who passed through there, the boy's inevitable future. He explains that everyone who arrives tries to resist as long as possible before being thrown into the mines. Terrified of death, these poor souls sell anything they can get their hands on to survive, giving even their own soul. But in the end, everything slips through their fingers, and they all end up in the same hole, merely delaying the disaster. The cook philosophizes that a real man leaves his name behind when he dies, but trash-like newcomers will only leave scrap. Staring at the boy in a somber way, the old man says he can hardly wait to see what will be left of him. Without paying much mind to the drama, Zion simply asks how much he owes for the food, receiving a charge of 10 coins. Outraged at the absurd price, the boy questions whether the meat was made of gold, reminding him that resources are scarce, and the skewer was already worth a lot. Laughing nervously, he mocks the tiny piece of meat and admits outright that he doesn't have all that money. Bothered, the protagonist accuses the old man of extorting the newcomer and asks him to ease up on the madness. In response, a sharp knife is violently driven into the table, right beside the boy's arm. Maintaining a defiant posture, Zion makes it clear that he is not going to pay a single cent. Suddenly, the boy's eyes fly open as he notices a movement too fast to follow. Before he could react, he is surprised by a sudden action from the cook. Sweating cold, the young man swallows hard, while the old man asks if he didn't find it strange for an elderly man to have a business in a hole like that. Displaying his absurd strength, the veteran lifts the boy by the collar in the middle of the darkness with no effort, pressing his fingers in with a threatening expression. The merchant wants to know what the deadbeat's next move will be. Without leaving time for an answer, he throws Zion's body brutally against the counter. Pinned against the wood, the boy panics, pleading for calm and insisting he has no money, suggesting they sort it out through conversation. With cunning, the old man guarantees he's not an irrational man and agrees to make a friendly trade for something else. The tension returns when the old man reveals that the mana stone hidden in the boy's pocket serves perfectly as payment. The protagonist freezes, shocked to realize that even the existence of that item had already become gossip around the camp. Extending a thick hand, the merchant demands the stone immediately, promising to pay a fair value for it. Struggling to escape, Zion curses indignantly and asks if the old man has any idea what he went through to protect the gem. Trying to escape the pressure, the boy asks the old man to give him a discount and put the debt on his account. Without patience, the veteran smashes his face against the table with brutal force. Watching the scene, a muscular henchman shouts, asking how long the boss is going to put up with the kid, suggesting they bury him right away. Invoking his power in his imagination, the old man launches a devastating sand attack that hurls the brute away in an instant. The other workers in the camp observe the scene, completely terrified by the demonstration of power. A sandstorm sweeps the place, destroying everything in its path and showing the merchant's absurd power. In the middle of that dark chaos, the boy raises his gaze in shock as the dust settles. Cutting through the illusion, the old man's hand squeezes Zeon's face, telling him to pay attention. The old man asks if he's okay, since he had been spacing out, making the young man curse upon realizing he had only been imagining the worst. Back to reality, the two continue sitting calmly at the table, as if none of that confusion had happened. Defeated, the boy slams the enormous blue mana stone on the table, handing over the item the old man wanted so badly. Evaluating the merchandise carefully, the cook murmurs, impressed with the size of the glowing crystal. Zion demands 300 coins on the spot, but the merchant counters that it's worth 100 at most. Ironically, the boy recalls that resources there are scarce and jokes he should have sold the stone as fertilizer. Furious at the provocation, the old man loses his composure and yanks the boy by the collar aggressively over the counter. Clenching his fists, the boy thinks with anger that he could finish the old man off right there, but decides it isn't time yet. Swallowing his pride, he demands at least a decent return on the deal. Agreeing, the veteran warns him to be careful or to guard the money, since the camp is full of oil thieves. In a rare moment of kindness, the old man says that since it's their first deal, he'll let the boy pick something from the scrap pile. He points to the mess in the back of the shed and guarantees he'll hand over whatever the boy wants to take. Rummaging through the junk with discouragement, Zeon complains that there's only trash there, frustrated at finding nothing useful. Watching the scene, the cook chuckles and comments to himself that the newcomer is quite an interesting fellow. He's amused by the boy's obsession with never coming out short, admiring that chaotic energy as the young man finds a bizarre mask. With no interest in the accessory, Zeon hears the old man ask if he didn't find anything better. Discarding the useless object, the boy hears the merchant explain that a caravan left it there. Then he picks up an old hourglass and decides to take it anyway, since there doesn't seem to be anything more valuable in the pile. The old man comments that he has a peculiar taste for useless things, but the protagonist simply agrees without paying much attention. Already turning to leave, the boy stops and asks the old man's name. Shouting from the middle of the stall, the cook reveals at the top of his voice that his name is Klexi. With a smirk, Zion says goodbye, stating he hopes to never have to cross paths with him again. Giving a little laugh, the old man replies that you never know about tomorrow. As he watches the boy disappear into the darkness, the focus shifts to the old hourglass of glass and metal the young man just acquired. Analyzing the object in his hands, Zion estimates the sand takes about 10 minutes to trickle down to the end. Already settled in the miner's filthy quarters, he sits on the rusty floor and begins breathing deeply to concentrate. Seeking control of his body, the boy inhales and exhales slowly. Letting out all the air from his lungs, he focuses on accessing his new power. Once again, his eyes begin to glow intensely as he holds the hourglass and commands the sand to move. To his complete disappointment, the grains remain motionless inside the glass, proving his ability doesn't work there. Frustrated, he clicks his tongue and concludes that strange sensation had nothing to do with his recent awakening. Resting his head against the wall, the young man is certain it's the first time he's seen the object. He stares at the hourglass and reflects that he felt something bizarre coming from it, as if it had been waiting for him. A disturbing flash of a girl trapped in a machine invades his mind, bringing a feeling that is both familiar and brand new. In the middle of his daydream, the room door is kicked open violently by a furious brute looking for the newcomer. Supervisor Park bellows, cursing the boy, demanding to know why he isn't in the mine and complaining he had to come find him. Keeping his calm, Zion demands respect, stating his name, and coldly points out that the man didn't even tell him where to go. Without warning, the supervisor delivers a brutal blow that sends the boy flying with violence. Clenching his fist with force, the brute mutters, consumed by rage. He grabs the newcomer and crushes him against the floor, screaming for him to shut his mouth once and for all. The aggressor continuously lands merciless punches, furious at being contradicted and questioning whether the young man considers him weak. With a sadistic look, the man warns that a useless nobody without powers should simply stay quiet and take the beating. Satisfied with the thrashing, the superior sighs and tells the prisoner to get up quickly and follow him. Fallen on the floor, the protagonist curls up in pain while trying to recover from the massacre. Staring at the floor with hatred, he memorizes the supervisor's face and promises himself he will certainly kill him in the future. Cutting to the entrance of the Sector 3 mine, the environment reveals itself as dark and oppressive. The workers greet Park Manhwa, who immediately orders one of the boys to hand the newcomer his equipment. Receiving the items, the boy discovers that the costs will be deducted from his magic stones and quickly asks about the payment amount. Adjusting his helmet, he pays attention as his colleague tries to explain how everything works. Suddenly, a heavy pickaxe flies directly toward him. Irritated, the supervisor states the boy will only understand the job once he starts digging, reminding him to also charge for the helmet. Then the big man orders the boy to be sent to Tunnel 972, leaving the colleague shocked, intimidating the worker. The brute asks whether he'd prefer to go in the newcomer's place, forcing the man to quickly agree. Guiding the boy, the colleague mutters curses, but the supervisor hears and threatens to kill him if he doesn't bring back any stones. Descending the dark mine stairs, the guide laments the young man's bad luck at arriving precisely on the day Park Manhwa lost everything gambling. Curious, the protagonist asks about the gambling spot and discovers the camp has every kind of vice, just like Neo say. Sarcastically, Zion comments that the business must profit a lot from idiots like the supervisor, impressing the guide with his boldness. Gripping the railing, the worker sighs, complaining about his own sensitive skin, but states the newcomer will probably be fine. Arriving at the bottom of the pit, he points forward, guaranteeing that absolutely nobody has ever been hurt in there. The dark and frightening tunnel of Sector 972 finally appears before them. Calm, the boy says he just needs to mine and will be back soon, but receives the ominous warning that there will be no return. The worker reveals that more than 12 people have already disappeared inside without leaving any trace. Standing on the other side of the gate, the man apologizes to the boy, and then thanks him. He confesses his relief at having someone to go to that cursed place in his stead. In a panic, the boy asks if they all died and shouts in outrage as he watches the colleague flee up the stairs. Alone in the darkness, he is shocked to realize he has truly been abandoned to his death. Curious, the young man swings his pickaxe, cursing everyone for throwing him into a death pit just because the boss was in a bad mood. Completely stressed, he throws the equipment away, wishing everyone would die, but the handle slips from his hands. Desperate, the boy stretches his arm, pleading for the tool to come back as it falls into a dark abyss. Observing the vast and bizarre environment around him, the protagonist wonders where he's ended up. He realizes that his rage blinded him to the absurd amount of mana in the place, and wonders whether normal people even feel that. Pressing his chest, the young man notices the energy grows denser with each step, aware that a common human would already be dead. Looking at the rocky ground, the boy finally finds what he was looking for. Relieved at the discovery, he celebrates finding his only working tool. Although the wooden handle is broken, he takes the object, happy to have recovered at least part of it. When he tries to express his gratitude for the luck, the phrase dies on his lips upon noticing an enormous red portal spinning just ahead. The boy's eye widens in pure terror at that threatening vision. Instinctively pulling back, the newcomer panics, praying he won't be sucked in by the anomaly. Unfortunately, the extreme gravitational force begins to drag his body and the stones inside the vortex. Without resistance, the old broken pickaxe is quickly swallowed by the magical rift. Painful memories flood his mind with voices saying he is rejected trash, making the young man question what kind of life he desired. A memory of getting beaten for stealing food surfaces, revealing that his only wish was not to go hungry. Then the past shows the violent pursuits through the streets of Nel Sealu, reminding him that deep down, he just wanted to have dreams, running desperately through dark alleys. His only choice was always to flee, paralyzed by constant fear. Having been brutally attacked by magic in the past, the protagonist reflects that he only wanted to live without the dread of imminent death. Extending his hand into the void, the boy confesses he only sought a normal, peaceful life. After being swallowed by the portal, his body crashes heavily, face down on the rocky ground. Rising slowly, he groans in pain, and is immediately bothered by the unbearable heat of the place. Upon touching the dark surface, the young man feels the dry texture and realizes everything is covered in ash. Staring at his own dirty hands, his mind begins to piece together the bizarre situation. Raising his head, the newcomer finally understands he was transported by the vortex he found in the mine. Before a gigantic burning landscape with rivers of lava, he concludes, shocked, that he has ended up inside a dungeon. Still kneeling, he scrapes the ground's surface to better analyze the hostile environment. Suddenly, a burning sting emerges in his fingers as he stares at the volcanic dust. In a desperate leap backward, the boy screams in pain, feeling his feet frying on the scorching soil. Accepting the cruel reality, he laments being completely unprepared in such a lethal place. With his hand covered in blisters, the young man deduces that the toxic air will destroy destroy his lungs if he doesn't escape quickly. Without wasting time, the boy tears a piece of his own clothing to try to protect himself. Tying the cloth to his face as a mask, he deduces that the dungeon must obligatorily have an exit. Staring at the colossal volcanic mountain, the protagonist concludes that the escape portal is at the highest point. With his breathing protected, he decides to take advantage of the absence of monsters to act before the heat kills him. Shooting off at high speed, the young man focuses on taking the shortest and most dangerous route. Leaping over a river of lava, Zion proudly declares he will never give up on living. Landing safely on the other side, he wipes the sweat, relieved to have escaped a fatal plunge. However, a misstep on a loose stone makes him slip badly. Off balance, the newcomer falls face first toward the flaming ground, begging for mercy. A violent impact throws him against the sharp, burning rocks of the mountain. Trembling in pain, the boy props himself on his arms and tries to keep his composure, saying the place doesn't scare him. However, his strength fails and he collapses to his knees, trying to catch his breath. Closing his fist against the scorching ground, an uncontrollable fury takes over his body. Screaming at the top of his lungs, he curses the mine supervisor and vows bloody revenge as soon as he escapes from there. Walking with difficulty through the ashes, the boy mutters that stress only makes things worse and tries to control his own rage. Gripping his own clothes tightly, Zion swears to fight with everything he has and promises to find a way back, no matter what. Walking with difficulty through the infernal landscape, he calculates that he just needs to endure the suffocation 4 more times. The boy leaps over a boiling river of lava, focusing only on making 4 more jumps to escape that place. Completely exhausted, the protagonist tells himself not to stop and to just keep moving without thinking about anything else. Supporting his injured leg, the young man refuses to accept that his life will end in a scalding pit like this. Stretching his arm forward in one final effort, he repeats that there is no way he will give up on moving forward. Suddenly, a gigantic fire monster bursts roaring from beneath him and swallows him along with the fury of the volcano. The colossal creature rises like a tower of burning flames, destroying everything around it. A brutal explosion of lava sprays violently through the air. Rocks and volcanic ashes rain down because of the monstrous impact. The fire leviathan begins descending, opening its immense jaw to crush its prey. With a deafening crash, the beast closes its mouth with brute force, swallowing whatever was in the way. Panting, Zion appears hanging from a stone stalactite, shocked by an absurd heat capable of melting even air. Holding on tight, he celebrates upon realizing he can also control volcanic sand and that it saved his skin. But luck doesn't last long, as the structure melts and the boy plummets to the ground in flames, grumbling in pain. Thrown face first on the ground, the newcomer feels the surreal heat of the dungeon is far worse than dealing with the monsters themselves. Breathing becomes torture, with the air burning inside his nostrils, his consciousness beginning to fade. Collapsed in the hot dust, the boy wonders if his time has come. Pressing the earth with his fingers, he lets out a weak laugh, remembering he swore to survive less than a minute ago, forcing his body to stand. The young man complains he hasn't even had a girlfriend yet, and finds it deeply unjust to die this way. Gathering his last strength, he plants his foot in the soil and tries to advance a little more. The boy murmurs an apology to the god of death and suggests he take a crocodile purse in his place, but without the young man noticing, a gigantic flaming eye opens right behind him. Noticing the scorching threat, Zion lets out a scream of pure terror. At that moment, a mysterious voice praises his interesting ability, making the boy freeze, thinking it's the Grim Reaper speaking. Upon hearing that his sand power has been discovered, the protagonist is left completely perplexed. Out of nowhere, a figure leaps, cutting through the flaming air toward the colossal beast, revealing a face marked by scars. The newcomer is impressed, noting it's just an old man with a beard. The veteran plunges from the sky, oozing confidence, while the boy can't believe what he's seeing. With firmness, the mysterious warrior grips the handle of his enormous sword, preparing a lethal attack. With brutality, the veteran swings his weapon, delivering a crushing blow from top to bottom. Startled by the imminent clash, the protagonist curls up expecting the worst. A colossal explosion of energy tears through the environment, creating a column of impact that devastates everything around the area. Enormous chunks of rock are instantly pulverized by the absurd force of the collision. The burning ground shatters, raising thick clouds of dust and destruction. Hurled away by the shockwave, Zion screams desperately, trying to protect himself. Fallen to his knees with ringing ears, the young man is disoriented, trying to understand where so much power came from out of nowhere. Looking around, he notices in confusion that the giant monster simply disappeared after the blow. Staring at the imposing figure walking in the lava, the boy realizes that man's energy is completely abnormal. Pressing the ground with trembling hands, he is certain the veteran is not just another ordinary awakened. Seeing the warrior rest his sword on his shoulder calmly, the newcomer admits the man's level of strength is on another plane. Heavy footsteps begin to echo as the old man advances through the destroyed surface. Stepping firmly in the volcanic ashes, the man calls for the boy's attention. With impatience, the big guy demands to know the kid's name right away, catching the boy off guard. Displaying an intimidating look, the man warns the young man has exactly 3 seconds to give an answer. Without wasting time, the countdown begins with the number 3 echoing in the hot air. The metallic sound of armor rings out as the veteran dictates the number 2 without hesitation. Xion's eye flies open in pure panic upon hearing the number 1 hovering like a threatening shadow over the newcomer. The man coldly declares that time is up. Raising the colossal blade, the warrior mocks, saying that refusing to speak easily resolves the situation. With his eyes glowing intensely, he warns that the punishment for silence is immediate death. Desperate, Xion waves his arms, pleading for his life, and the old man interrupts the attack, laughing upon realizing he isn't mute after all. Screaming at the top of his lungs in fear, the young man finally shouts that his name is Xion. Finding the name pathetic, the veteran mocks the response, leaving the boy very irritated at being judged by this stranger. In one quick and casual movement, the warrior delivers a giant energy slash of red that tears through the cave. Sheathing his sword calmly, he introduces himself, saying his name is Dowin. Shocked at the sudden attack on the wall, the protagonist screams, demanding to know what is wrong with this lunatic. The young man stands up, indignant, questioning the reason for so many threats and gratuitous insults against him. Xion tries to explain that he's grateful for being saved, but is immediately interrupted by the old man calling him an idiot again. Grabbing the boy by the collar without patience, Dowin warns he fell into a trap, while the newcomer grumbles about the lack of respect. The veteran explains that the trap occurs when the dungeon's mana overloads and creates a rift to release excess energy. Meanwhile, this magical rupture sucks any living being that happens to be nearby directly into the abyss. Letting out a laugh and pointing his finger, the warrior congratulates the boy's absurd bad luck, and the boy takes the opportunity to curse his former boss. Dragging the kid by the head without ceremony, Dowin sighs and warns he's going to prove right then and there why the boy is so dense. Holding the young man's face firmly, the man tells him to focus his own energy directly into his eyes to be able to see properly. With his pupils glowing intensely, Xion hears the rigid order to keep quiet and simply condense the mana in his vision. The old man teaches that you must not use your normal eyes in these dangerous places, but instead feel the enemy's presence with your soul. Following the advice, the protagonist's eyes widen in shock as he notices the silhouette of a gigantic beast camouflaged in the lava. Holding the boy still, the veteran concludes he finally managed to see it, while the newcomer is shocked by the monster being so close. The warrior details that the magical beast uses pure invisibility to swallow easy, inattentive prey, exactly like the young man. Staring at the invisible beast just ahead, Xion goes into total panic at not having sensed a shred of threat before the warning. He realizes in terror that he would certainly have been cooked alive by the creature without even noticing had he been wandering there alone. Analyzing the bizarre situation, the protagonist recognizes in silence that the lunatic big man has already saved his life twice in a row. Admiring the warrior's imposing posture from behind, the boy tries to imagine what the limit of that man's strength might be. Still curious, he asks again who this man is, but ends up getting scolded for having forgotten Dowdin's name so quickly. Still confused, Xion screams, demanding to know where so much power comes from and what this bizarre place is. The veteran responds calmly that they are inside a dungeon and that this place is now his hunting ground. He warns that as for who he is, the boy will have to see with his own eyes to find out. At that moment, the earth begins to tremble violently as a new creature takes form. A massive pillar of flames and energy bursts from the ground, ripping through the molten soil. Stunned by the deafening noise, the protagonist curls up in panic, not understanding what is happening. Looking up, he wonders in terror what the old lunatic is doing. Several demonic shadows begin to emerge from the flames around the boy. From afar, the big guy shouts, calling the newcomer an idiot to get his attention. Firmly, the warrior demands that the young man prove his worth by surviving that situation alone. Before he can process the absurd order, a fire beast charges brutally in his direction. Acting on instinct, the boy tries to counterattack but complains about the monster's absurd speed. He makes an enormous effort, trying to keep up with the creature's slender movements. The beasts glide through the area with frightening agility, easily dodging the blows. Indignant, the newcomer curses the slippery creatures, realizing they focus on attacking his blind spot from the left. In frustration, the protagonist launches a wave of sand to try to push back the imminent threat, but the shadow beast passes right through the attack, plunging into the burning flames. Unable to dodge in time, the young man is grazed and lets out a groan of pain. He realizes in desperation that even using the sand and forcing his vision, he can't keep up with the pace. Cornered in the middle of the inferno, the boy concludes he's going to end up dying if the situation continues like this. Remembering that Dowin has already saved his skin twice, the newcomer refuses to die as a useless person. He notices the warrior is saying something but can't hear the call. The old man points irritatedly, noticing the boy's ears are ringing and he understands nothing. The veteran tries to teach a way to see enemies that normal vision can't keep up with. Losing patience with the boy's slowness, the big guy shouts, calling him an idiot once more so he reacts. Hit again by the beast, the protagonist decides to focus on the advice and try to find a way out. He concentrates to the maximum, trying to purify his mana and gather all the energy directly into his eyes. The boy's eye glows intensely as he begins to feel the environment through magical energy. Suddenly, the flaming beast that was previously a fast blur becomes perfectly clear in his vision. With the threat finally clear, the young man prepares to counter the lethal dive coming from above. Focusing his magical perception, the protagonist begins to feel exactly where the danger is located. He waits patiently until the creature's energy reaches the perfect range for the strike. With precision, the newcomer lands a precise counterattack up close, surprising even himself with the result. Impressed by the technical effectiveness, the boy wonders whether the veteran had planned all of this from the start. While the young man deals with the smaller monsters, he notices the old man leaping toward a colossal fire beast. The big guy lets out an insane laugh in the air, declaring he hasn't had this much fun in a long time. With a single brutal movement, Dowin fires a massive wave of destruction that tears through the battlefield. Dominated by adrenaline, the warrior furiously demands more enemies to appear and face him. He dives directly into the flaming abyss, challenging dozens of giant beasts at once with his sword. The violent impact raises a thick cloud of dust and flames, instantly crushing one of the creatures. Landing on the destroyed ground, the veteran sighs deeply. Frustrated by the lack of a real challenge, he bitterly complains that today's dungeons have far too few monsters compared to his era of glory. Observing the destruction, the old man grumbles he had barely started warming up before the fun ended so quickly. On the other side, the protagonist observes the chaotic scene and feels sorry for the massacred monsters. The young man is left speechless upon confirming that the lunatic big man annihilated all the giant beasts single-handedly. Still breathless, the boy asks in relief whether the monster infestation is finally over, but the calm doesn't last long and he curses in frustration upon sensing a new gigantic threat approaching. The volcanic ground begins to crack violently, releasing a crushing energy into the environment. Hit by the absurd pressure, the young man feels his own body suddenly grow heavy and weaken. Unable to withstand the impact of the monstrous aura, the protagonist falls to his knees and ends up vomiting on the hot ground. Writhing non-stop, he pleads to know what kind of terrifying abomination is emerging now. With complete naturalness, the veteran explains that thundering is the roar of the dungeon's boss. The big guy advances toward the infernal flames, revealing that the boss was his true target. Terrified, the newcomer stares at the colossal silhouette of the creature that just emerged from the volcanic depths. Far from feeling fear, the old man breaks into a sinister smile, celebrating the long-awaited arrival of the main target. An enormous winged creature with a dark blue aura rises majestically in the middle of the fire. The boy asks in fright whether that's a dragon, but Dowin immediately refutes the theory. The warrior analyzes the beast and confirms that despite not being a dragon, it is at minimum a powerful rank B threat. The colossal beast opens its wings, projecting a domain of devastating energy across the entire territory. Impressed by the kid's knowledge, the old man notes that Zion knows about the energy fields projected by monsters. Dowin explains that beasts with a red domain specialize in pure physical combat, just like Warrior Awakened. However, upon noticing the blue ice barrier emanating from the creature, the boy goes into total panic at the discrepancy. The colossal beast fires an absurd blast of ice at the big man, freezing the scorching air. Desperate, the protagonist screams a warning that the creature is of the magical type and possesses a completely ridiculous power. However, a colossal red cross of energy cuts through the air and instantly destroys the freezing attack. The young man feels minuscule before the grandeur of the brutal clash of forces that shakes the cave. With a blank mind, Zeon realizes that all his survival experience in the mines means nothing there. Watching the beast prepare a new attack, he accepts that normal rules don't apply against that monstrous old man. Advancing like an incandescent missile, the veteran moves to a frontal attack without a shred of hesitation. The gigantic beast raises its darkened magical claws, ready to slash the insolent human in the air. With a formidable pulse, the warrior swings his heavy sword, preparing a devastating cut. He lets out a thunderous war cry, concentrating all his combat fury into one single attack. At the same moment, the monster spits a sphere of concentrated magic to disintegrate the opponent. Baring the teeth in pure euphoria, the old man shows that lethal danger only makes him more excited. With an apocalyptic crash, Dowin's blade clashes violently against the beast's annihilating beam. In pure euphoria, Dowin questions whether the attack is hurting the beast. He tightens his grip on the sword handle and guarantees he'll end this suffering quickly. The warrior advances with everything in the clash of energies, declaring this will be the day the monster dies. Hurled backward by the absurd gust of wind, Zeon realizes in desperation that the day of death will actually be his. The boy runs for his life in the middle of the destruction, pleading for the two lunatics to settle the fight in conversation. Sensing danger approaching from behind, the newcomer looks back in terror. A colossal ice spike bursts from the ground with a violent crash. Skidding on the hot floor, the protagonist complains they should fight farther away, since even the shockwave alone is lethal. The brutal impact of the battle makes the boy curl up to protect his face from the storm of debris. Completely intoxicated by the adrenaline, the veteran delivers another insane blow, declaring the fight is too entertaining. He continues taunting the Scarlet Beast, comparing that lethal battlefield to a simple amusement park. At that moment, the volcano floor completely gives way under the absurd pressure of the titanic clash of powers. In the middle of all that chaos, the ground below begins to open rapidly. Realizing he is about to plunge into the abyss, the boy simply lets out a resigned curse at his own fate. With nothing to hold onto, the protagonist is swallowed by the immense crater that formed there. The young man plunges into free fall in the darkness as debris flies around him. He desperately tries to control his own body in the air to avoid a fatal impact. The sensation of imminent death takes over the newcomer during the anguishing descent. Forcing his vision to the max, the boy searches for any foothold on the cave walls. Up above, the apocalyptic battle between the big man and the beast continues, completely ignoring the boy. Staring at the monster up close, the warrior mocks, wondering, is that all the enemies got? He humiliates the creature for retreating so much, declaring it's a disgrace for a dungeon boss. Seething with rage, the Scarlet Beast opens its colossal jaw and concentrates a dense sphere of magic. Without showing a shred of fear, the veteran smiles, impressed by the monster's new trick. The next instant, a devastating ice beam cuts through the air toward the insolent human. The impact of the pure magic raises a blinding curtain of blizzard and smoke in the area. However, an arrogant voice echoes through the environment, asking whether the creature was looking for him. Caught off guard, the dungeon boss quickly turns its neck toward the sound. Taking advantage of the opening, Dowin appears from above and drives his incandescent sword directly into the back of the target's neck. The beast lets out a deafening roar of pain as the red energy tears through its body from within. Pressing the blade, the warrior reveals he spent an entire year wandering through the desert just to find this prey. He explains coldly that his objective was always to rip out the magical heart to forge his own weapon. With no more patience for games, the old man coldly sentences the opponent to death. The giant sword begins to pulse uncontrollably, draining all of the wounded monster's vitality. Unable to withstand the crushing force, the colossal beast explodes in a wave of dark energy. With that, the veteran's blade absorbs the pure magic, gleaming intensely with new scarlet marks. Landing on the now silent ground, the warrior observes with satisfaction the formidable glow of the new equipment. He analyzes the weight and aura of the heavy sword, feeling the absurd difference in power. With a maniacal smile, the big man praises his own weapon for having become so much stronger. The moment is cut short by the protagonist's voice, who indignantly questions whether the lunatic old man is really talking to a sword. Trapped in the rubble, the boy acknowledges the veteran's brute strength, who is surprised the newcomer is still in one piece. Completely exhausted, the newcomer sighs, saying he barely escaped with his life from the fall. He recalls managing to create a sand ramp at the last second on the walls to soften the impact. Sliding violently across the sharp rocks, the boy suffered several deep cuts in the process. Using his own hands in desperation, the young man slowed his descent brutally to ensure survival. With the risky maneuver, he ended up crashing uncontrollably against the side of the volcanic crater. Panting heavily, the protagonist compliments his own tenacity for making it out of yet another hell. He throws in the veteran's face that he only survived because he took so many beatings that his reflexes improved, earning a backhanded compliment in return. With a calmer atmosphere, the big man warns that the dungeon will start to collapse soon. With no time to rest, the newcomer panics upon being lifted from the ground by his collar. Amused by the young man's desperation, the warrior lets out a monstrous laugh. With a brutal throw, he hurls the boy toward a dimensional rift in the ceiling and bids farewell. Flying through the air, the protagonist curses the old man with all his might, comparing him to the worst mine supervisor. The young man passes through the magical distortion and is spat back into the inhospitable environment from before. Without any elegance, the boy eats sand upon landing face first in the scorching desert. Spitting the dirt out, he irritatedly asks where they ended up and quickly understands that was the escape route. Already outside, the big man adopts a somber tone and tells the kid to pay attention. He confesses to needing the boy's sand manipulation, but points out that the way he is now, he's useless for the job. Pointing to the horizon, the veteran indicates the safe path back to the military fortress. Shortly after, he offers a second risky option for the young man to stop being a weakling. Completely confused by the direction the conversation is taking, the young man asks how long this alliance would last. With sincerity, the warrior admits this unpredictable journey may take years or decades. Receiving the final ultimatum, the protagonist lowers his head to absorb the weight of that decision. He ponders on the chance of returning to his mediocre life in the city versus throwing himself into a path of certain death. Unyielding, the big man crosses his arms and demands an immediate answer from the boy. Covering his face, Zion lets out a bitter laugh at the false freedom he's been given. With a grin from ear to ear, he points his finger in the veteran's face and asks if the old man has completely lost his mind. Indignant, the newcomer describes the absurdity of trading a home with a bed for a suicidal journey across hot dunes. Maintaining his intimidating posture, the old man dryly agrees that this is exactly the deal being offered. Wiping the sweat from his brow, the young man declares the conversation need not drag on any longer. Surprising the warrior, the protagonist walks forward decisively and states he'll go along for the journey. He reveals with hatred that he has debts to settle and acknowledges his current powerlessness to take revenge now. Turning his neck with a somber look, the boy threatens that he'll also pay back whoever is in front of him, but quickly adopts a realistic tone, admitting the lunatic old man is the most powerful being to have ever walked the earth. Amused by the kid's promise, the warrior flashes a mocking smile and already decrees the newcomer will die before that. With conviction, the boy guarantees he will become stronger than anyone if he follows the big man. Mocking this certainty, the warrior warns the kid will live to regret it in just one day. He tells the newcomer to get moving and calls him an idiot, reminding both of them they have a long road ahead. At that, the landscape shifts to a scorching desert under an unforgiving sun. Completely drained, Zion pleads for the veteran to slow down a little. He reminds him they've been walking non-stop for 6 hours and desperately asks for a break. Completely ignoring the boy's suffering, Dowin continues his relentless march across the dunes. Irritated by the silence, the protagonist complains about the old man's mood swings, questioning why he says nothing. The heat borders on unbearable, and the young man guesses the temperature must be passing 120 degrees. Sinking his feet in, he grumbles that the cursed sand makes walking difficult, and that he'll soon suffer from dehydration. Unable to take any more, the newcomer shouts at the top of his lungs, asking what he should do in this situation. The veteran calls the boy a fool, pointing out that he can't use even 1% of his own power. The question hangs in the air, since the kid does have the ability to manipulate sand, yet struggles to walk on it. To the warrior, this difficulty is simply pathetic. Outraged, Zion argues he only awakened a few days ago and is merely a Class F, very different from the big man's high rank. Dowin completely loses patience and tells the boy to stop talking such nonsense, since nobody cares about Class F or S. The newcomer insists on the topic, retorting that people of high class were simply born with a lot of luck. The old man explodes, shouting that the protagonist can't give up just because he feels he wasn't blessed enough. He emphasizes that compared to any other normal person, the kid has actually had more than enough luck. Grabbing the young man, the warrior questions what good it is to have a functioning body if his head is full of garbage. He releases the newcomer and reminds him the power belongs to the boy, so it's up to him to know it better. The lesson is clear. The protagonist needs to discover on his own how to break his own limits and use his abilities. Zion stares at his own hands, feeling the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. Already turning his back, the veteran warns that if the kid doesn't figure this out, he might as well consider himself dead. With the message understood, the young man shouts that he's already got it and asks the old man to stop nagging. Standing in the middle of the desert, the boy begins to analyze his own situation more calmly. He calculates that the reach of his sand control is roughly 5 meters. Despite finding the distance short, the newcomer knows he can make this work in his favor. The plan is simple: condense the sand beneath his feet to make it completely solid and save energy. The technique works perfectly, preventing his feet from sinking and making walking much easier. However, he quickly notices this strategy is draining an absurd amount of mana. The boy discards the idea immediately and decides to try concentrating the energy directly in his own legs. The tactic does make walking easier, but the newcomer notes he isn't using his special sand ability. Observing the effort from afar, the warrior notices the young man keeps trying without giving up. The big man reflects that even being a Class F, the kid's mana control is already at a much higher level. Excited by his own progress, the protagonist runs toward the veteran to show off the discovery. He boasts about controlling only the sand touching his feet, which made the journey extremely comfortable, provoking the old man and laughing at his own brilliance while walking with total comfort. The reward for his arrogance is a sound flick on the head delivered by the big man. The warrior complains the boy is very irritating and tells him to stop wasting energy on nonsense. He warns that time is running out and tells the idiot to hurry up. The scene cuts, and the protagonist wakes up disoriented on the ground, not understanding where he ended up. The old man grumbles that the useless one has finally woken up, complaining about the time wasted looking after him. Confused, Zion notices his entire body is covered in fresh bandages and injuries. Without any explanation, Dowin simply tosses a piece of dried meat to the young man. The veteran tells the boy to eat while he listens to a story from his youth. He recounts that in the past, survival wasn't such a big problem, since people took pride in protecting the weaker ones. The old man admits the world changed and that the current state might be normal for the boy, but he could never get used to it. Wrapping up the talk, the big man warns that if the newcomer wants to die, he can just stay lying there comfortably. Otherwise, he should get up quickly. And the young man simply agrees while chewing his food. Staring at his partner, Zion silently reflects on the warrior's advanced age. The boy imagines the absurd amount of time and memories the old man has accumulated over his entire life. At that, he notices the veteran isn't chewing the dried meat, but rather softening everything with his own saliva. Dowin explains that in a desert without water, that's the only correct way to eat. The protagonist grumbles that his partner could have warned him earlier, realizing the lessons are delivered through practice. He compares the situation to someone teaching how to fish rather than handing over a ready-made fish. However, the newcomer then comments out loud that he's never seen a fish in his life, immediately receiving an order to shut up from the old man. Already walking under darkness, the boy lets out a powerful sneeze. He complains about the freezing cold that dominates the desert nights. On top of the climate, Zion laments not having slept at all, because the lunatic partner spent the entire night talking to his own sword. Completely dehydrated, the newcomer begs for a little water during the exhausting walk. Without a word, the veteran wrings his own jacket directly into the young man's mouth, making him drink the accumulated liquid. Zion chokes and complains that his partner hid yet another survival trick. He finally understands the big man spread his clothes on the ground before sleeping precisely to collect the dew. Angrily, the protagonist promises to become insanely strong just to take revenge on the old man someday. Ignoring the threat, the warrior asks whether the kid has already started to feel what is approaching. The young man stops walking immediately upon feeling strong vibrations coming from the ground. From atop a gorge, dozens of monstrous beasts completely surround the two. Dowin recognizes the pack as horned hyenas, finding it strange they're attacking in broad daylight. Calmly, the old man asks whether the idiot can survive on his own, or whether he'll need rescuing again. Displaying a confident smile, the boy refuses any kind of help. He points to himself and guarantees he doesn't need a babysitter to handle the situation. Staring the pack down, the newcomer decrees he will resolve the problem with his own hands. Concentrating his mana in the surrounding sand, the protagonist prepares for combat. With a brusque movement, he fires a massive volley of sand that pierces and destroys the monsters in its path. Concentrating all his energy into his eyes, the boy focuses on the imminent combat. Immediately, enormous sand spikes burst from the ground and impale the monsters squarely. But the victory doesn't last long, as he realizes the absurd number of beasts still remaining in the circle. Breathless, Zion understands he needs a quick plan before running out of mana and dying from the attack. Surrounded by enemies, the newcomer realizes that brute force won't do any good in that situation. The challenge now is to figure out how to fight using as little energy as possible to survive. With his arm outstretched, the protagonist tries to formulate an efficient strategy in real time. At that, one of the monsters bites his arm violently, making him scream in pain and curse the beast. Staring at the open wound, the young man comments it feels like he took a shot that went clean through the skin. That throbbing pain ends up planting a brilliant idea in his head. Without losing rhythm, the rest of the pack charges ferociously in his direction to finish the job. Maintaining a firm posture, he waits for the exact moment to test his new counterattack. The plan is now simple. He just needs to punch holes through the opponents instead of crushing them. Firing concentrated sand beams, the boy pierces multiple enemies at once. Laughing at his own brilliance, Zeon concludes that a hole kills just as well as blowing heads off. During the confrontation, the newcomer reflects that mana is directly linked to the life of whoever fights. Understanding this, he focuses on cost-effectiveness, using the minimum energy for a lethal attack. Laughing, the young man notices the big man is only slowly eliminating the beasts. However, a huge and frightening beast appears out of nowhere, mocking the weak attacks. The furious monster charges with full force at the unsuspecting warrior. Stopping the blow with ease, Dowin warns that a dog that bites people cannot be allowed to live. Displaying killer instinct, the veteran prepares to retaliate the attack with enthusiasm. Watching from a distance, Zeon panics upon realizing what is about to happen again. The big man roars at the top of his lungs, announcing a true massacre in the desert. A colossal explosion of energy destroys everything around in a fraction of a second. Caught off guard by the shockwave, the protagonist is hurled away, screaming. Fallen on the ground, he curses the partner as a lunatic, very concerned about possible witnesses to the blast. The impact of the attack leaves a gigantic crater torn right in the middle of the sand. Staring at the destruction, the boy doubts the old man is human for doing that without using abilities. Interrupted by growls, the newcomer decides it's best to stay out of the way to avoid being the next target. At that, the boy notices the alpha female of the pack stealthily approaching the partner from behind. The gigantic monster attacks by surprise, unleashing a true storm of lethal lightning. Without flinching, the warrior notices the force field and assesses the creature as Class B or higher. The massive electrical discharge hits the big man squarely in a blinding flash. Desperate, the protagonist screams at the top of his lungs for the old man to watch out. Welcoming the attack with open arms, the veteran simply laughs, relaxed in the middle of the lightning. The scene of pure absurdity leaves the young man completely shocked and speechless. The old man stretches casually, commenting that the shock served as a great shoulder massage. Satisfied with the stretching, he decrees the end of the game and tells the beast to just die already. With a devastating and brutal blow, Dowin smashes the alpha female directly into the ground. Applauding nervously, Zeon decides to ignore his partner's absurd strength in order to keep his own sanity intact. He asks if they can leave already, but receives a gratuitous insult for still being alive. Curious, the newcomer asks about the collected horn, and the big man explains it will make an excellent weapon. Tossing the monster's head to the boy to wear as protection, the veteran equips him. Then he hands over a dagger, warning that the free rides are over and the kid will hunt his own food. Holding the raw meat, the veteran teaches which parts of the monster are poisonous and which are safe to eat. Scolding the distracted boy, he tells the idiot to move quickly before the morning sun appears. Agreeing promptly, the pair resumes their march through a landscape filled with strange rock formations. Walking cheerfully along the road, the protagonist hums, satisfied with his own evolution. Despite having plenty of food thanks to the hunt, he still suffers greatly from the desert's relentless thirst. At least moving around became easy thanks to his new technique of hardening the sand beneath his boots. Full of himself, Zeon taunts the big man, asking if he isn't jealous or very tired from his advanced age. The old man's response comes swiftly in the form of a precise sand kick directly in the kid's face. Nimbly dodging the low blow, the newcomer laughs loudly, celebrating his small reflex victory. But the joy ends when the warrior creates a colossal wave of dust that buries the boy, punishing his arrogance. Spitting out dirt, the young man complains he was already dying of thirst before swallowing all that filth on purpose. In the middle of his indignant grumbling, he freezes on the spot upon feeling a sudden change in the air around him. Observing Dowin's attentive posture, the newcomer realizes that strange feeling isn't just his imagination. Looking fixedly in the same direction, he can barely believe what his exhausted eyes are seeing. Together atop the scorching dune, the two stare at a visual miracle in the middle of so much desolation. Radiating pure joy, the protagonist celebrates having found a real oasis, something he thought was just a rumor. The small crystal-clear lake shimmers in the distant horizon, beckoning the tired pair to rest. Running like a desperate madman, the boy celebrates, screaming the end of so many days of absolute thirst. Matching his pace closely behind, the veteran just clicks his tongue, but seems relieved at the discovery. In a final sprint of pure excitement, the newcomer throws himself without a second thought in the direction of the liquid salvation. Plunging face first into the water, he finally enjoys the wonderful sensation of immediate freshness. Breathing deep after the dive, the young man feels relief penetrate every pore of his tired body. The cold temperature soothes the scalded skin after so long baking in infernal heat. In the middle of this refreshing euphoria, he suddenly notices a strange anomaly at the bottom of the well. A warm, blinding, hypnotic light glows mysteriously in the middle of the underwater darkness. Immediately, an unreal and heavy drowsiness takes over the boy's mind and he loses his strength. Trying to fight against this paralyzing trance, he hears the partner's furious shouts warning of the danger. Sensing the trap, the warrior advances desperately at high speed to save the idiot. Floating unconscious on the deceptive surface, the exhausted young man becomes easy prey drifting on the lake. Hiding cowardly beneath the sand, a gigantic abyssal monster had been using the oasis mirage only as bait. At that, the veteran grabs the boy's collar with force to pull him out of the water in time. A monstrous creature violently emerges from the sand, revealing its true gigantic form. Being dragged backward, Zeon twists and panics at the size of the threat. Without hesitation, Dowin jumps in front of the partner, wielding his colossal sword. Holding the weapon firmly, the warrior prepares to deliver a fatal blow. With a devastating attack, the old man cuts the beast in half, raising an enormous shockwave. Impressed by the partner's strength, the young man recognizes the creature from stories he's heard. Observing the beaten beast beneath a rainbow, the boy understands the oasis was only an illusion. Sheathing his sword, the big man explains that the beast uses the light on its forehead to devour the unsuspecting. The veteran stares at the kid with an expression of pure disappointment. Then he lands a solid flick squarely on the boy's head. Complaining about the pain, the newcomer hears that he shouldn't think he's top of the world just because he learned the basics. Shouting, the warrior warns that stupid people die quickly in this unforgiving desert. Completely shrunk, the protagonist just quietly agrees to avoid taking any more beatings. Changing the subject, the old man tells him to skin the carcass, leaving the young man quite confused. Dowin explains that the beast is level C and its belly skin is ideal for sewing a cloak. The boy naively asks if his partner needs new clothes, receiving a long sigh. Losing patience, the veteran shouts that the cloak is for the kid and questions his intelligence. Disguising his nervousness, the newcomer apologizes for the imbecile question. Observing the carcass from afar, the young man notes how much the creature resembles fish from the land. The big man mocks his lack of experience, while Zeon is amazed at the discovery. With a surprised look, the protagonist confesses it's the first time he's encountered a creature like this. Sinking his dagger into the beast's thick skin, he comments that fish are terrifying. Having difficulty cutting, the boy complains about the heavy work while the old man continues teasing. Stepping back a bit, the young man concludes that the beast's hide is incredibly resistant. To solve the problem, the newcomer channels his mana into the dagger blade to sharpen it. With the energy channeled, the weapon begins slicing the hard skin with great ease. Excited about the process, he plans to sharpen a piece of fin to use as a needle. Building on the idea, the protagonist realizes the beast's tendons will serve perfectly as thread. At that, a brilliant epiphany takes over the boy's mind about what to do with the materials. Waiting seated, the veteran loses patience watching the kid transform the monster into finely chopped garbage. Breathing deeply, the warrior notices material still remains and tells the boy to try again. Time advances quickly as the sun sets and the starry night covers the desert. Radiantly happy, the protagonist finally holds up his finished cloak and celebrates, calling to the winds. Putting on the piece after 8 failed attempts in a row, he proudly jokes he could even sell the garment. The old man approaches, catching the boy's attention. The boy pulls back in fear of losing his precious outfit. Ignoring the drama, the warrior extends a large organ and orders him to eat all of it. Understanding nothing, the newcomer discovers the goop is the fish's gallbladder, an extremely rare medicine. With a somber tone, the big man warns that if the boy doesn't swallow that, he'll die in the desert. Embracing the giant organ while the veteran grumbles in pain from tired arms, the protagonist swallows hard, trying to summon some courage. He bites off an enormous chunk of raw flesh, preferring the horrible taste to taking a beating from his partner. Chewing the goo, the newcomer widens his eyes, very surprised by the unexpected texture, devouring it eagerly. He notices the food is as light as air and doesn't fill the stomach. Within seconds, the young man cleans his hands after gulping down the entire gallbladder hastily. Seated near the ground, Dowin lights a small fire with his sword, announcing, "It's time to burn." Zion's chest begins to glow intensely, leaving the boy confused about the situation. Suddenly, the protagonist suffers a violent spasm and writhes desperately in the middle of the sand. Falling to his knees, he grabs his own body, feeling a burning far too strong to bear. In pure desperation, the young man reports that his energy is out of control and melting his insides. Screaming in agony in the dark, the newcomer hears the veteran tell him to just hold on and not cry. Observing the landscape, the warrior philosophizes that everything in the desert is like a false oasis that vanishes into the sand. Pointing to the bubbling remains of the monster, he explains that even those beasts return to the earth. Very relaxed, the big man ignores the screams of agony from his partner writhing in the background. Twisting in pain, the protagonist begs at the top of his lungs for the warrior to stop philosophizing and help him. With his face lit by the flames, the old man hears the furiously angry boy's death threat. Irritated by the screaming, the veteran tells the kid to shut up because he's trying to sleep. The sun rises and the newcomer wakes up sprawled in the sand, completely disoriented and exhausted. The first thing he sees is the warrior's frightening face, staring at him upside down. Taking a huge fright, the young man quickly pulls back on the ground, complaining he almost had a heart attack. Getting up with difficulty, the boy retorts he didn't sleep at all, he simply passed out from pain. Upon observing his own hands, he notices a drastic change in his physical condition. Closing his fists, the protagonist notices his muscles are firmer and full of energy. With a renewed posture, the newcomer feels the mana overflowing and his body as light as sand. Impressed with his own evolution, he wonders how he became so powerful so quickly. Walking beside him, the veteran reveals that the absurd advance was thanks to the disgusting medicine. The old man explains that the item strengthens the body to withstand the infernal climate and is worth a fortune. Shocked at the item's value, the boy asks why he received something so precious. Laughing, the warrior confesses he only helped because the kid was a very useless dead weight. Excited about his new strength, the young man promises to be helpful, but is promptly told to finish eating. Analyzing the giant carcass, the big man notes that the beast's meat provided several days of rest. Turning his back on the camp, the veteran warns that the break is over and the journey must continue. Demonstrating confidence, the protagonist eagerly agrees and follows the path accompanying his leader. Facing a furious storm, the newcomer feels the cutting winds as merely a gentle breeze. Watching his partner march closely, he marvels at the old man's resilience advancing non-stop. Walking just behind Dowin, Zion notices his partner hasn't said a word in days and thinks he might be going through some age-related problem. The boy complains they've been walking in a straight line for 2 weeks and asks if the leader even knows the way. Suddenly, a giant ant monster bursts through the sand while the newcomer repeats the question at the top of his lungs. Without patience, the veteran strikes the creature with force and tells the kid to shut up immediately. Sighing with exhaustion, the protagonist asks how much farther they have to go before being swallowed by the desert dust. At that, he notices something strange around him and goes on alert. The colossal beast lets out a piercing shriek, making the warrior notice that its shell is quite resistant to direct blows. The old man advances, disappointed they couldn't pass through unnoticed this time without a fight. Activating his mana vision, Zion maps the subsurface and discovers the swarm of insects is nothing to joke about. Ready for combat, the young man manipulates the sand around him and challenges the enemies to settle the situation quickly. He fires a furious attack against the beasts, warning that the big man will kill him if there's any delay in the journey. A swarm of ants violently erupts from the ground, shrieking in response to the aggression. With the situation under control, the boy compliments the creature's obedience and prepares an explosive ability. A lethal volley of sand shatters the monsters squarely, hurling debris across the entire battlefield. Satisfied with the chaotic environment, the newcomer comments how stormy days are perfect because they give him infinite ammunition. Looking for the veteran in the middle of the confusion, the boy shouts indignantly that he can't be abandoned like that. Fleeing from the crawling beasts, he grumbles that his partner has no loyalty whatsoever and will end up alone because of it. Worried about his own big mouth, the newcomer looks back, praying the warrior didn't hear the insults. In a panic, the young man tries to apologize while his internal radar tracks a radius of 10 meters perfectly. By keeping his senses sharp at all times, the protagonist manages to react instantly to any magical beast that appears. However, the dense energy he just captured in the environment is completely different from normal. Through his sharpened perception, the enormous number of enemy signals reveals a threat far worse than pure terror. A gigantic army of monstrous insects breaks through the desert's surface in direct pursuit. Running desperately for his life, the boy wonders where the devil that absurd infestation came from. Without stepping out of his panic, he screams for any help from the master. Far from there, Dowin simply follows the allies' desperation, sitting calmly on a safe rock. Noticing the absence of a rescue, the newcomer understands he can't keep whimpering like a useless child forever. The logical conclusion is that the leader definitely detected the horde beforehand, proving this is simply a lethal test. Full of determination, Zion declares that no matter if there are thousands of beasts, insects are still just insects. Shortly after the declaration, several sand explosions burst across the field, obliterating the front line of the relentless swarm. Taking advantage of the distraction, the protagonist lands a massive pillar of solid earth right in the face of one of the creatures. Immediately after the blow, he leaps agilely to escape the sharp fangs on the ground. However, one beast manages to grab the boy's leg, and he regrets having underestimated the number of monsters in the area. Violently fighting to break free, the young man accuses the insects of cowardice and demands a fair one-on-one fight. In a moment of vulnerability, more enemies approach from the flank, leaving him completely cornered in the sand. To push back the horde once and for all, the newcomer generates a powerful seismic shockwave around himself. The impact of the technique hurls the protagonist upward and takes him away from the ground danger zone. Observing everything from above, the young man is shocked to see the entire region has been transformed into a true anthill. Floating for brief seconds, Zion plans to find an elevated point, since those things supposedly don't fly. At that, a powerful blow strikes his back by surprise, breaking through his defense. An enormous winged ant intercepts the boy in the dark sky and pushes him with force toward the ground. In a state of pure shock, he can barely believe those pests have evolved to hunt in the air. The flying beast advances mercilessly, shrieking against the vulnerable prey plunging into free fall. Unable to stabilize his body, the young man is brutally crushed against the rocky ground by the beast. The devastating damage of the fall makes him cough blood while extreme pain takes over his ribs. Thrown into the scorching sand, the boy tries to recover his lost breath while suffering from internal injuries. Even quite hurt and bleeding from his mouth, an unbreakable flame of pure determination emerges in his gaze. Breathless, he calls for the master, knowing full well the veteran is evaluating his performance from afar. Instead of yielding to imminent despair, a manic and confident expression takes over the dirty newcomer's face. Getting to his feet, surrounded by the horde, the protagonist dares the old man to watch up close how he's going to survive that hell. From his observation point, the big man hears the promise and praises the audacious attitude of the injured kid. The warrior reflects that the ability to manipulate Earth is an absolute blessing in a world completely transformed into desert. He knows the young man could very well have used this rare gift to live a quiet, luxury-filled life. However, the leader ponders that limited people don't understand the world's disaster, obsessed as they are by false illusions of power. According to his rigid principles, an awakened must evolve and master their own strength to avoid being just a generic, disposable soldier. Watching the explosions on the battlefield, the master confesses that the weight of history continues to haunt him. The brutal tragedy of the ray of light sweeping through buildings and cities 100 years ago still lives vividly in the veteran's mind. He recalls with immense bitterness the total impotence of humanity, watching so many innocent lives be reaped in vain. The tragic memories of colleagues, neighbors, and even his own daughter disappearing in the flames fuel his contained fury. Extending his trembling hand, the warrior laments having been a failure who lost absolutely everything before his own eyes. Returning to the present massacre, the master's narration highlights that the boy chose not to follow the easy path of submission. For Dowin, the newcomer has infinite potential if he continues to throw himself into the lethal abyss between life and death. The old man shows extreme satisfaction, knowing that the practical results of his brutal training are already blossoming. Manipulating a suffocating dust hurricane, the young man traps the monsters, confirming the evolution his mentor expected. Completely euphoric with the flow of energy, Zion taunts the insects, decreeing their situation is ruined. From the rocky ground, one of the frightened beasts stares at the immense sand monstrosity taking shape in the heights. Concentrating all his available mana, the protagonist condenses the element, creating an extreme pressure projectile. In a lethal and precise movement, the heavy weapon is mercilessly fired against the nerve center of the swarm. The deadly mixture of gravity, wind force, and pure brute energy transforms the technique into an unparalleled catastrophic attack. opening his arms in a dominating gesture. The boy amplifies the explosion's damage dozens of times over the enemy army. He decrees at the top of his lungs the complete annihilation of all pests that dared cross his path in the storm. The newcomer also declares that the monster's great strategic error was not having killed him before his full awakening. Watching the light and destruction show, the big man crosses his arms, amused by the kid's exaggerated excitement. The storm slowly dies down, and the protagonist stands firm, breathing deep in the middle of countless dismembered carcasses. The entire landscape reveals an immense sunken crater, proving absolutely the frightening level of power achieved by Zion. Exhausted, Zion lets out a breathless laugh in the middle of the destruction he just caused. He shouts, asking if the old man saw that, promising to annihilate the rest of the enemies. However, the celebration doesn't last long, and the boy is completely shocked. A gigantic creature grabs him from behind without emitting a single sound or presence. Bleeding from the surprise attack, he realizes it isn't a stealth ability, but rather a lethal venom. With that, he understands why his mana is failing, deducing it to be a toxin that blocks energy points. Furious at the humiliating situation, the protagonist curses the beast at the top of his lungs. At that, a violent blow from the monster's paw throws him forcefully against the ground. Fallen face down with blurry vision, the boy swears, feeling the weight of his own defeat. Upon opening his eyes, he notices he's surrounded by hundreds of glowing eyes and wonders if he's been taken to the central nest. Completely immobilized, the young man can only observe the approaching figures in the cave's darkness. Several huge and grotesque larvae appear, shrieking around their prey in defense. One of the disgusting creatures crawls directly over his injured arm. Then the beast drives its fangs into the newcomer's skin without any mercy. Desperate at the lack of reaction from his own body, Zion realizes he will be devoured alive in that place. Nearly without strength, he accepts it as the end while waiting for his memories to flash before his eyes, but quickly realizes not even a single good moment comes to mind on the brink of death. While the larvae continue biting his flesh, pure indignation takes over the young man. In an extreme outburst of rage, the boy crushes the pest with an explosive punch into the earth. One of the adult ants recoils, startled by the prey's violent reaction. Trembling and laughing maniacally, the young man curses fate while trying to get up. He screams that it's unfair to have no happy memories, and vehemently refuses to die in such a pathetic way. Calling the monsters wretches, the magic mark on his arm begins to glow intensely. A massive explosion of sand bursts from the ground, sweeping everything around it. The devastating impact hurls the adult beast violently backward. Other colony monsters are also thrown against the walls by the shockwave. The entire cave structure trembles as the newly awakened power tears the earth from below upward. The protagonist raises a true lethal forest of spikes, impaling the enemies without giving them a chance to defend. Assessing his own body, he confirms he leveled up while the venom disappears and mana overflows. Staring at the illuminated insignia on his wrist, Zion still struggles to believe the sudden evolution in the middle of hell. Feeling the flow of energy, the boy notes his powers are on a scale entirely superior to the lowest rank. Even so, the determination in his gaze is mixed with a clear warning sign. Right before him, an armored abomination emerges slowly in the middle of all the destruction. With brutality, the monster shatters the massive sand spears as if they were nothing. Watching the creature crush the rocks, Zion is terrified by the brute strength of that gigantic abomination. In a desperate attempt to contain it, he fires a concentrated volley of projectiles, but the attacks shatter against the hard shell, making the boy curse against the creature's insane resistance. Clenching his fists on the ground, he quickly concludes there is no way to win in direct combat. It becomes very clear that any conventional attack will not leave a single scratch on the formidable armor. Needing an urgent plan, the protagonist calculates a way to overcome that absolute defense. He deduces that, since he can't pierce or crush the target, he needs to rip off the protection all at once. While the strategy is being formed, the colossal beast advances ferociously, shrieking at the intruder. Pounding his fists firmly, the boy decides he's going to apply a lethal twist to peel the beast alive. To execute the plan, he wraps the enemy in an invisible crushing pressure that makes the creature howl in agony. A blinding flash appears over the shell as the monster contorts, trying to resist the compression magic. To counter the constant pressure, the abomination releases a shockwave that echoes throughout the entire area. The boy covers his ears, screaming in pain and cursing the monster's unexpected tactic. Feeling his head throb, he realizes it is a high-frequency attack capable of exploding his brain from the inside out. The beast continues emanating the lethal vibrations in the center of the underground cave. Even in pure agony, Zion stares at the beast, indignant that it saved such a dirty trick for the end. With an insane glow in his eyes, the young man accepts the suicidal challenge and prepares for the worst. manipulating the dust into a furious vortex around him. He focuses all remaining mana. He openly declares that this direct confrontation will determine who exits the hole alive. Screaming at the top of his lungs, the newcomer charges with total fury to execute the decisive attack. Suddenly, his vision darkens and his consciousness abruptly fails, as if strings were cut. Falling backward without control, the protagonist is baffled as to why his muscles have shut off out of nowhere. With a trembling hand stretched out in the air, the young man wonders if he has already hit the limit of his own body. As he finally collapses, he curses his own weakness and laments having such a useless physique in critical moments. Before the final impact, strong arms hold him, confirming in a sarcastic tone just how pathetic he is. The partner big man supports the injured boy and warns that lying on the dungeon floor is certain death. Relieved at the rescue, the young man opens a weak smile, calling the master in a choked voice. The veteran laughs at the kid's audacity and confesses he even deserved the last blow for not having been completely useless. In the background, the dead queen ant proves the newcomer fought bravely and earned the right to survive the test. With his face dirty with blood, the boy warns that the explosion ruptured his eardrums and left him completely deaf. Noticing the allies' lack of hearing, Dowin simply drags him by the collar without any ceremony. The protagonist is dropped on the rocky ground and wonders about the sudden change of location. Ignoring the confusion, the warrior removes a mysterious object from inside a small crater in the stone. The young man's eyes fly open in surprise upon noticing a sphere pulsing with pure brilliant energy. Dowin turns toward the kid, displaying the enigmatic recently collected artifact. Without beating around the bush, the leader brings the globe directly to the boy's face, indicating through mime that it is a strawberry medicine. Confused by the bizarre attitude, Xian stares at the disgusting thing, deducing the order is to eat. Holding the queen's glowing egg, he wonders whether swallowing a raw mana stone is physically possible. In the attempt to read the master's lips, the newcomer worries whether the slop is going to make him feel ill again. The old man mocks, warning it will most likely kill him. But the boy doesn't catch the provocation. After a long sigh of exhaustion, the young man bites the sphere, convinced that a strange meal won't be his end. Chewing the disgusting delicacy, Xian internally confesses he doesn't know what strawberry tastes like, but tries to swallow. Surprised by the unexpected flavor, the boy perks up, finding the thing incredibly delicious. However, the joy doesn't last long and soon a painful sting takes over his body. Fallen on the ground in agony, the newcomer calls for the master, feeling the target tearing through his insides. The lethal effect begins to act, twisting and inverting all his organs in a brutal way. Being extremely toxic, the queen's egg carries enough venom to turn anyone inside out. Without mercy, the toxins pierce the young man from within, ensuring a slow and painful death. Screaming in pain, the protagonist demands to know what the old man made him swallow. Without showing concern, Dowin warns that he needs to get used to pain if he wants to survive in this world. Trembling, the young man questions how anyone could adapt to such absurd suffering. Shortly after, he begins to vomit blood as the venom devastates his insides. Losing strength, the boy curses his luck while his body surrenders to the damage, accepting his end. He regrets having believed he could finally trust someone in this miserable life. With his vision darkening, he admits to being just an idiot for having let his guard down. At that, the young man passes out on the dungeon's rocky floor, poisoned. Ignoring the unconscious boy, the warrior calmly turns to the beast's carcass. Using his brute strength, he breaks the creature's shell with a single heavy blow. Very satisfied with the result, the veteran displays the enormous mana stone, celebrating the superior quality of the loot. Assessing the rest of the creature, he decides to keep everything that can be salvaged for later. Then the master adjusts his giant weapon on his back, ready to move on. Staring at the fallen partner, he laments the situation in an almost friendly tone. However, Dowin simply accepts that the weak die, and this was simply the kid's destiny. Silence takes over the cave while the big man observes the motionless body from afar. Justifying his actions, the warrior mutters that their time was running out and hard decisions had to be made. Suddenly, Xian's consciousness returns and he is shocked to realize he's still alive. Surprised by the quick recovery, Dowin mocks the newcomer's expression at waking up. But before the old man finishes speaking, a colossal sand explosion bursts from the ground. Protecting his face from the dust, the leader curses the kid's audacity for making such a mess for nothing. Seeing the boy's fury taking shape in the dust, he just stares at him with a challenging air. Indignant, the protagonist wastes no time and launches a deadly attack in the direction of his own ally. Receiving the impact head-on, Dowin tells the idiot to stop with that little show. The earth spikes continue advancing brutally against the veteran's unshakable posture. Seething with rage, the boy demands to know why his partner tried to assassinate him in cold blood. He charges screaming, refusing to accept the cruel betrayal after everything they went through together. Out of control, the newcomer swears he will not forgive that treacherous act. The young man continues pressing the attack, throwing all his recently discovered power against the enemy's defense. The intense violence of the continuous blows makes the dungeon walls tremble non-stop. Exhausted after unleashing so much aggressive energy, Zion breathes with difficulty, staring at the damage in the stone. However, fury turns to confusion upon realizing his effort had no effect whatsoever. Intact in the middle of the smoke, the old man points out that the egg must have rotted the boy's brain since he can't reason anymore. Shocked at the absurd scene, the young man confirms the monster absorbed all the frontal attacks without taking a single scratch. Sighing heavily, the leader explains it would have taken just a flick to finish his kind, so poisoning him would be useless work. Pondering the enormous difference in power, Zion agrees, feeling a bit hasty. The master reveals that the lethal egg also works as a miraculous medicine, expelling all impurities from one's insides. He concludes by saying that this empty space is filled with pure mana, something the kid himself must have noticed during the attack. Feeling the energy overflow, the protagonist realizes his capacity increased absurdly thanks to the bizarre delicacy. Moved by the master's true caring intent, he calls to him in a tone laden with gratitude. Emotional, the boy throws himself in a tight embrace, crying and asking forgiveness for having doubted him. Irritated by the clinginess, Dowin tells him to let go already, while Zion celebrates that the medicine even cured his deafness. Finding a certain amusement in the scene, the warrior tries to hide it, ordering the crybaby to release him immediately. Internally, the big man confesses in relief that the dangerous gamble almost resulted in the boy's real death. Not knowing the extreme risk he ran, the newcomer tries to pull himself together, hoping everything is forgiven. The veteran admits to himself it was a risky bet, since he needed the test subject to get strong quickly in order to be useful. Returning to his tough stance, the master grabs his partner under his arm, announcing it's time to get out of there. Being bounced upside down, the young man wonders without understanding why he's being carried that way again. A sadistic and hurried expression takes over the old warrior's dirty face. He warns in an urgent tone that time ran out and they need to flee from there as quickly as possible. Upon realizing what is about to happen, Zion panics, foreseeing the worst. Far from there, some burrowing monsters walk calmly across the lethal desert's hot surface. Suddenly, the pair explodes directly from underground, sweeping the creatures away with a massive pillar of pure force. Flying through the air, Dowin lets out an insane laugh while the boy screams, begging for a normal trip. Without pity for the other's desperation, the master retorts that the kid shouldn't have slept for 4 days straight, while mocking how a pathetic little runt would ever find a wife. Something grand on the horizon catches the old man's attention. Noticing the partner's sudden change, the young man asks what is happening now. Looking in the same direction, he is left speechless at the unbelievable sight. Observing the landscape from up high, the protagonist utters a swear word, dumbfounded by the creature's immense size. Even from kilometers away, the stone-shaped monster is so gigantic it seems to be right there. The veteran grumbles about the lack of peace in the world and reveals that this is the famous mobile fortress, Arkalon. Explaining the immense beast's utility, he says people tame the creature and modify its invincible shell for use as transport. Startled by humanity's audacity, Zion can't believe there are lunatics capable of riding that abomination. Still flying through the air, the brutal and grandiose reality of the outside world finally hits the inexperienced boy's mind. The master completes the thought, seriously warning that there are absurdly powerful figures controlling these things. With the vastness of the desert swallowing the pair, the colossal beast slowly marches, lifting tons of golden dust. Shortly after, the two begin plunging into freefall toward the hot sand after losing their impulse. Finally, the pair lands violently on the arid ground, opening a large crater with a heavy impact. A voice warns it wasn't certain from a distance, but confirms it really is him. Zion asks who the intruder is while Dowin tells the boy to stay still. The newly arrived figure with a monocle stares at the warrior, remarking that it's been a very long time, revealing his figure in the sandstorm. The white-bearded old man calls Dowin by name.